and even just touching on the point of how the Ethereum Foundation runs very much like this textbook DAO. And it seems like they've just accumulated a lot of tech debt where there's a lot of things that they've built up over time. And now it's hard to make changes and they don't feel like there's certain things that they should change or have a role in. Whereas Solana was able to come up, build on arguably better tech. We'll leave that up in the air, or maybe not, and build on this tech and then also come in and have this driving force of we are going to innovate on what matters. And I think a big thing about Solana is they're very focused on building the scaling and having teams come in and fill the gaps for other things. And I think we've seen that happen for certain things where they're like, look, let's very much focus on this massive problem blockchains, layer one networks have, where there's been points during this bull market where it didn't matter what network you went to, they were all congested. So it's a very apparent issue that, okay, decentralization, we need that, but is it the North Star right now when we can't even get the people inside of the crypto ecosystem all using a layer one blockchain? We want to onboard billions. So it's great to see a team really address this problem and hone in on it.
Yeah, totally agree. And I love just the focus of the Solana Labs team on doing all this stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. And even on the idea of Solana Pay, it's great, right? Like we have this co-working space and now we have Solana Pay up there with the snacks. So really just incorporating people in. Not sure if you were able to check that out yet. But
yeah, I was able to buy this Topo Chico actually.
Perfect. Yeah, and just moving forward, I think another fun one here, I just glanced at a question I had is, how is touching on onboarding to the masses, what do you think are the major touch points that will bring on this 1 billion users? I think there's a couple obvious ones, but curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, the big obvious ones are NFT and gaming for sure. No really unique insights there, but there's a lot of people who've raised money to build crypto games that are going to launch this year. And a lot of creators are going to issue NFTs and stuff. So those are the two fairly obvious ones.
Yeah, 100%. And just on that idea of crypto gaming, I grew up playing games like Counter-Strike, League of Legends. I understand somewhat this skin obsession, whether I go and spend all this money on skins, it's happening. So I very much see that. What are your thoughts on just crypto gaming in general? It sounds like the sector has a lot of work to do in the sense of what's building, but there's a lot of people coming in. How do you think this sort of barrier happens between big game studios and crypto natives? Do you think this is, I mean, this might be a bad question as in how do you answer this, but is this something where crypto natives are going to be able to build these games, or game studios are going to come in, or a combination of both? I mean, we've seen studios like Ubisoft completely blow up when they tried to launch NFTs. So what are your looks on this? What do you think the gaming industry needs to do to really onboard the users? I think there's a massive issue of speculation.
Yeah, so I don't think there's I think there's a lot less product market fit on crypto gaming than most people think. There's a lot of interesting things to do with open economies in games. I think Axie kind of sparked that. And so there will be a lot of interesting stuff to happen. I think right now, probably what's happening is people are overfitting. They're trying to force square pegs in the round holes. And so, like, I think a lot of the NFTs you're seeing in some games are not super well thought out. And that's causing some of the backlash. I think if the game is really designed from first principles as an open economy, I think that's can be very interesting to run on crypto rails. The other use cases for crypto and games, I'm a lot more speculative about.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense there. And shifting a ton more on the idea of onboarding a bunch of users, what is Multicoin's outlook on crypto and Web3 in India? This seems to be like a massive topic recently. How are you guys posturing towards this? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, India's a big place. It's like 1.3, 1.4 billion people. They're obviously all going to build stuff. It seems like the Solana and the Polygon ecosystems are probably the two most substantial there. We're certainly very intrigued by it and are trying to figure out how we can be effective in that part of the world.
Yeah, that's great. And then even just jumping a little more here, we're touching a bit on decentralization versus scalability, kind of the trilemma, I think people call it. where are we going with decentralization? I mean, some people obviously it's not too important. Some people it's more important than others. DeFi and DAOs seem extremely loaded right now. How do you think this continues to evolve? Do we ever get to like a complete decentralized aspect? I think even watching these protocols built, their businesses at some point, they need a team behind them to really bootstrap them and get them going. Just turning them to the community. When does this come? How is this done? What are your thoughts there? This one's a pretty broad and out there one for you.
Look, every community is different, and how fast you should decentralize is a function of the nature of the product, the market, and a bunch of other things. Generalize. I can generally say that I think it's important to engage your community pretty early on, and I think most teams try and do that in earnest, which is good. Beyond that, it's hard to generalize.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's just a great one because we love to throw out the term DeFi DAOs, but it's like, okay, how much of this do we really have right now? And it's just probably one of those things as the space continues to mature, we'll get an idea of what makes sense. Another point I always like to bring up, we can't even figure out how to govern ourselves as nations and states. So trying to take this down to the granular level, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. So curious to watch that develop. And really moving forward here, in broader Solana, what are you excited to see? It seems like Multicoin is very postured towards Solana with this idea of tech and ecosystems will start to consolidate. What specifically on Solana would you like to see in the next 2 to 5 years from a more thesis-driven standpoint?
The thing that we've probably spent the most of our time on is we've invested in a handful of things recently that are not yet announced that reflect this, but that is people doing stuff in the real world that's really infused with tokens. So I think Helium is the first really good example of this. There's a few other things that will start to become public over the next few months that we think really reflect the idea of layering tokens into real world things.
Yeah, that's great. Really just trying to bridge that gap. I think right now there is that massive gap where you have the outside world and then the crypto world, and people struggle to find those ties. So it sounds interesting that you guys are looking for those bridges there. And then just in general, I know you have a hard stop coming up here, but starting to wrap things up here, there's been a ton of Solana hackathons going on. And I think this is just a testament of why we're here, why you're here, the idea that Solana is one of these chains that will continue to stay. What is your read on the hackathons and the talent coming in? Are there any notable things you've been seeing come out of these things?
Yeah, I mean, we've backed probably 10 teams that came out of hackathons. So starting as far back as Mango and Saber from the very first one. Last night I was judging for the Wormhole and Serum hackathon. And then the Riptide hackathon is going to come up here in the next couple weeks. So, I mean, look, we have written a lot of checks into those teams, and we will continue to do more.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear that. Great to be here. And even just like the overall environment of having the builders, it really whips everyone up into shape, especially when it's like, oh, look, all these other teams are here 12, 16 hours a day doing the same thing we're doing, whether or not you have these connections back where you're from. So it's great to really see the ecosystem come together, have all of these sponsors put on these events. And I think it really differentiates Solana. Really, to wrap this up here, Kyle, I just have one last thing. And my main question is, as Multicoin, is Solana still this main idea for you guys? Do you just see one of the biggest things is continuing to compound what has worked versus changing the thesis now? What's the idea on that? I mean, it seems like I answered my own question there.
Theses should not change very frequently. They should change occasionally as you get new information, but I would say all the information we've gotten in the last 12 to 24 months, sports settling down on Solana, not changing. So
yeah,
all in, let's go.